Welcome to Sleepbound Tales. Tonight, we bring you a story from our Dark series, full of suspense, shadows, and the unknown. A couple finds themselves caught in a sudden storm, and an old, mysterious house appears through the rain. What waits inside is unclear, but something is watching. The air is heavy, the silence unsettling, and every creak and whisper feels alive. If you enjoy chilling tales and eerie atmospheres, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment below to join us on this journey into darkness. Prepare yourself. Something is waiting just beyond the door. The thing that wore her face. The forest was calm, sunlight filtering through the high canopy into mottled green patches on the narrow dirt path. Lila walked beside me, her hand brushing against the ferns and low branches, laughing softly as she bent to examine a cluster of wildflowers. "It's like a secret garden," she said, brushing a leaf off her sleeve. "Do you think anyone actually comes here?" We had made these walks our little ritual, an excuse to leave the noise of daily life behind. Usually we took familiar paths, but today we had decided to explore somewhere new, curious to see where the winding trails might lead. The scent of moss and damp earth rose with each step, mingling with the faint tang of wood smoke from a distant cottage. Birds flitted from branch to branch, their calls punctuating the soft rustle of leaves beneath our feet. I smiled at her enthusiasm, enjoying the simplicity of the moment. We moved easily, talking, laughing, sharing these quiet pockets of time that had become ours alone. But the sky shifted. Clouds thickened and rolled swiftly overhead, dimming the light and turning the forest a deeper, muted green. A single drop of rain fell on Lila's cheek, then another, until a steady drizzle began, pattering against leaves and soaking the undergrowth. The earthy scent sharpened, carried on the breeze with the faint electricity of approaching thunder. We picked up our pace, mud squelching beneath our shoes. The wind tugged at our jackets and tangled Lila's hair, and distant rumbles vibrated through the ground beneath us. Her grip on my arm tightened just a little, and I felt my pulse quicken alongside hers. Lightning flashed, illuminating the silhouette of the house up ahead. It crouched just off the path, nestled among gnarled trees, roof sagging and walls mottled with age. Windows flickered with reflected light from the storm, shards like watching eyes that vanished the moment the glow passed. "Let's get inside," I said, nodding toward the structure. Lila nodded, shivering slightly, and together we ran the last few steps to the porch. The wind pushed against us. Rain plastered our hair to our faces, and the forest seemed to sigh around us. Pushing open the heavy door, we stepped into the shadowed interior, leaving the storm behind. We cautiously stepped over the threshold, and the door creaked ominously as it swung shut behind us. The storm outside raged still, a relentless hammering of rain against the windows and the occasional jagged flash of lightning illuminating the worn floorboards. The house itself seemed oddly calm, almost expectant, as if it had been waiting for visitors for decades. Dust floated in thin beams of light, disturbed only by our careful movements, and the smell of old timber, faint mildew, and something metallic lingered in the air. The furniture in the main hall was coated with years of neglect. A long wooden table stood near the wall, its surface scarred and warped. A vase tipped sideways, dusty, its flowers long dried. An old armchair with one sagging armrest seemed to watch us silently. I ran my fingers along the edge of the banister, feeling the grooves worn smooth by countless hands over decades. The quiet was profound. The only sounds are careful steps and the wind rattling the outer walls. Lila paused by a low shelf, her fingers lightly grazing the spines of dusty books. She let out a soft sigh. "So many years. Lived here, I guess," she murmured. A small globe, cracked and faded, sat on a pedestal nearby. A faded rug beneath our feet seemed to trap the echoes of our movements, each step sinking slightly into its worn fibers. The air was thick, heavy with the weight of history, and for a moment I could almost imagine the house breathing alongside us. We wandered slowly, examining the details. A set of candlesticks, now blackened and coated with dust. A small, cracked clock frozen at 3:14. Remnants of a tea set arranged neatly on a sideboard. Cups still upright as though someone had left in a hurry. Everything spoke of a life carefully lived and then abandoned, frozen in time. I felt a shiver creep up my spine. It was then that we noticed the portraits lining the walls of the hallway. A particularly large one drew my attention. An older man, seated, his hands folded, eyes stern yet kind. Beside him, a woman with a gentle smile, her hands resting delicately in her lap. Beneath the portrait, a small plaque read, "Jonathan and Maribel Halloway, 1923 to 1998. They must have lived here a long time," Lila whispered. I imagined quiet mornings filled with tea and newspapers, the faint creak of floorboards announcing each other's presence, long evenings by the fireplace, the scent of books and wood smoke curling in the air. For a brief, dizzying moment, I almost felt their presence lingering in the house, a ghostly echo of life that once was. The corridor opened up into several rooms, a small sitting area, an old piano with a missing key, a cabinet half filled with brittle letters and photographs, a painting of a boy with a kite, perhaps their child, stared out at us with an uncanny intensity. The careful order of these objects suggested someone meticulous, someone who had treasured these memories until the end. And yet, the neglect whispered that time had caught up with the house, leaving it abandoned, though still brimming with the quiet weight of a once-lived life. Suddenly above us, a floorboard groaned sharply, almost deliberately. I froze, heart hammering. No voice, no movement visible, yet the sound suggested that something, or someone, was moving across the upper floor. The wind outside seemed to pause for a heartbeat, amplifying the ominous silence that followed. "We should check it out," Lila whispered, her voice tight, a tremor betraying her fear. I nodded, swallowing against the sudden dryness in my throat. Together we ascended the narrow staircase to the first floor, each step creaking beneath our weight, echoing through the empty house. At the top, a narrow corridor stretched ahead of us. To the left, a bedroom with a sagging bed frame and yellowed sheets. To the right, a bathroom, its tiles cracked and stained, a sink hanging precariously from the wall, a slow drip echoing faintly in the hallway. And in the middle of the corridor, a ladder had been lowered from the attic hatch above, splintered in places, faint rot and the stench of decay drifting down from the shadows. Another noise, soft and deliberate, came from above. Something scraping or shifting, faint but unmistakable. We froze again. The house had grown colder, the shadows deeper. "Hello?" Lila's voice quivered as she called up, her tone almost pleading. Is anyone there? The silence stretched on, thick and heavy. Then, almost imperceptibly, a voice slithered down from the attic hatch.
Help!
It was human enough to trigger a reflex to respond, yet wrong, distorted, guttural in its undertone, almost animal. Something was lurking beneath those syllables, something that didn't belong. Rationally, it could have been someone in need, but instinct screamed at me that it was something far more sinister. Lila gripped my arm tightly, her knuckles white. "We should check it," she whispered, barely moving her lips. "We can't just ignore it." A sickly, coppery smell rose from the ladder, mingling with the damp rot of the attic. My chest tightened with each breath, dread settling deep in my stomach. Every instinct screamed that what awaited above was not human. I took a slow, trembling step toward the ladder, each movement deliberate, every nerve on edge. Lila followed, her eyes wide, darting nervously between the bedroom door, the bathroom, and the shadowed space above. The air grew thicker as we approached, damp and fetid, carrying the unmistakable tang of iron. My stomach churned. The first step onto the ladder creaked under my weight, a sharp protest that echoed in the narrow corridor. Lila climbed behind me, whispering, "Be careful." But the words barely reached my ears. The further we ascended, the stronger the stench became, clinging to our clothes, our hair, our skin. Dust swirled in the faint shafts of light from the grime-streaked window, moving like tiny phantoms in the gloom. At the top, the attic sprawled before us, a small, claustrophobic space beneath the slanted roof. Old furniture, trunks, and crates were stacked haphazardly along the walls, creating jagged shadows that danced with every cautious movement. The floorboards were warped, uneven, and mottled with dark stains, long dried but unmistakably sinister. Bones lay scattered in the corners, some tiny, delicate fragments, others larger, grotesque shards of what might have once been human, or worse. A soft, deliberate sound came from the far side of the attic, a scraping, a subtle shuffling, like claws against wood. I froze, the hair on the back of my neck bristling. Lila clutched my arm, trembling, eyes wide. "Do you see it?" she whispered. Her voice was barely audible, swallowed by the oppressive darkness. I shook my head, unable to move, unable to breathe easily. Then the eyes appeared. Two small, luminescent orbs, glowing yellow and unnervingly intelligent, pinned us in place. They were animalistic, predatory, but held a cruel awareness that made the blood in my veins turn cold. Before I could react, the creature lunged from the shadows. Its speed was unnatural, its shape a grotesque blur. I barely registered Lila's scream before a violent force struck my back. I tumbled down the ladder, wood splintering beneath me, pain exploding along my spine and shoulders. The last thing I saw was her terrified face, eyes wide, a flash of those same yellow orbs in the dim light, and then darkness swallowed me. The impact knocked the wind out of me completely. My vision swam, and my ears rang with the echo of Lila's scream, fading into the oppressive silence of the attic. Pain throbbed in every limb. I tried to call out, tried to reach her, but my body refused to obey. And then, mercifully, or perhaps cruelly, the world went black. When I finally stirred, it was to the cold bite of the floorboards beneath me, the sharp scent of damp wood and iron heavy in my nose. My body ached with a pain that ran deep, gnawing in my back, arms, and legs, but worse was the silence. The house was empty. No footsteps, no scraping, No faint whimper. Nothing except the distant drip of water somewhere above, and the whisper of wind through broken shutters. I forced my eyes open, squinting through the dim light that spilled from the half-broken windows. The attic hatch loomed above, the ladder now still, silent. Blood, my own, I realized with a shudder, stained the floorboards, trailing back toward the corridor where I had first seen the ladder. And then I noticed more, splatters leading out of the house into the darkness beyond. Lila's presence was gone. My mind raced, dread twisting every thought. I wanted to stay, to search, but a part of me, the part that knew instinctively, knew too much, told me that following those marks might mean never returning. Trembling, I pushed myself upright, ignoring the scream of pain from my ribs, and stumbled toward the door, guided by the faint, rainy light spilling from outside. Outside, the storm had subsided into a dull, relentless drizzle. The forest seemed normal again, almost serene, the night betraying none of what had occurred inside. But I knew better. Every shadow along the path seemed alive, every rustle of leaves whispering the memory of those yellow eyes. My heart hammered in my chest as I fled, each step carrying me further from the house, further from Lila, and yet deeper into a terror I could never shake. Weeks passed in a blur of empty searching. Daylight offered little comfort, as the house and its horrors clung to the edges of my mind like a shadow I could never shake. The villagers whispered among themselves. Some spoke of a wolf or a stray bear that had wandered too close. Others of Lila simply running off, driven by some unknown impulse. None of them knew. None of them could know the truth. I had tried to speak of the yellow eyes, the sound of that twisted voice, but the words died in my throat, dismissed as fevered imagination. And yet, every night, I replayed it all in my mind. The attic, the bones, the creature's glare, Lila's scream echoing into nothing. It was several weeks later, one late night. I had been pacing the small living room, staring at the fireplace that hadn't been lit in days, when a gentle knock reached my ears. Knock, knock. Not urgent, not demanding. Just steady, deliberate. But there was something familiar in its rhythm, a cadence that hinted at someone alive, someone who might finally bring news. My chest fluttered with cautious anticipation. Could it be a villager? Perhaps someone had seen Lila or found a clue, anything to explain her disappearance. I moved toward the door slowly, my fingers brushing against the worn doorknob, and peered through the small glass panel. I hesitated for a heartbeat, then pulled the little curtain aside and froze. There she stood, framed in the dim glow of the porch light, soaked from the rain that had begun to fall again, her hair plastered to her cheeks, her body shivering slightly. My heart leapt in relief before logic could intervene. It's her. It has to be her. Then I saw it, her eyes, that unnatural, piercing yellow, the same color that had burned through the attic darkness. My stomach sank, my knees weakened, and a cold, creeping dread crawled up my spine. The hope that had guided me here was ripped away in an instant, replaced with the stark, unyielding realization that what stood before me was no longer human. A whisper reached my ears, barely audible, carried on the night air.
Help!
The words slithered in the darkness between us, guttural and wrong. A faint echo of Lila's voice distorted into something alien, animal, and cruel. It was the same sound from the attic, the same twisted syllables that had haunted my dreams since that night. I stumbled back from the door, hands gripping the frame for balance, my mind racing to reconcile the impossible. The face I knew, the voice I loved, and the thing that had claimed her in that cursed house. The rain pattered softly against the glass, innocuous and gentle, a stark contrast to the horror reflected in those eyes. And in that moment, I understood. Whatever had worn her face, whatever had taken my Lila, had finally come for me. And there was no hiding, no bargaining, no escape from what lurked beyond the fragile barrier of wood and glass.